Yes. Video games. I love video games. So many great ones. There's a huge list of them that I'm not gonna list. But there's also a huge list of terrible video games. Video games you should never play. Video games that when you play, God forbid, and you feel like the programmers A, didn't know how to make a video game, B, wanted you to feel like shit while playing a video game, or C, all the above. And we're gonna count down 30 of those. Hi guys, this is DPX. Welcome to the top 30 worst games of all time. But before we get started, you know what to do. Be sure to like this video, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, and leave a comment, and you'll be a loyal subscriber.
This was probably the first Famicom game I've created, which...
Whenever there is a very successful console out there, there are bound to be shovelware. Whether we're talking about the DS, the PS2, or most recently the Switch, but the biggest offender and the console by far with the most shovelware on it has gotta be the Wii, since it's got a lot on there. There is this one company known as Data Design that published a game known as the Ninja Bread Man. Then a game known as Anubis 2, which, yeah, I don't know what happened to Anubis 1. Then they released a game known as Rock and Roll Adventures. Then a game known as Mythmaker's Trixie in Toyland. All of them make this list because they are all literally the same thing with a different skin and title. Wow, we're starting off this list with 4 games at the same time. Great. They are all just so bland and boring. Terrible controls, gameplay that gets old within like a minute, and the fact that Data Design thought they can get away with releasing the same game 4 times is laughable and shows how low some companies will go for money and to support the Wii, I guess. But they didn't get away with it.
Angel number 29.
Oh hey, I get to shit on this game again. I did that not too long ago. Oh boy, how are they allowed to take Bomberman and turn him into this? Why do you turn a cute little robot into a dark and gritty robot? That's not all though, cause Bomberman Act Zero also plays like shit too. There is some horrifically bad collision detection in the game, as well as camera angles so bad they make you want to vomit. Not to mention, the gameplay gets very old very fast. I think the big problem with Bomberman Act Zero is that it's a horrible idea to begin with, and to even think about. Not only do you take Bomberman and turn him into this, but you make a terrible game as well. This is disrespectful to any fan of Bomberman.
I'ma need another one. Eyes closed, I won't come.
You know what movie franchise is really cool? Rambo. There are 5 movies, some better than others, and you'd expect Rambo to get a game, and on top of that, maybe even a good one. Well, there was Rambo on the NES that tied with the first Rambo movie, and that was shit. But in 2014, there was another Rambo video game, and it's bad. Like, way worse. And it wasn't tied to anything. I don't know why it exists. This does take scenes from the movie, and it's also an on-rail shooter, which isn't quite what I'd imagine for a Rambo game. There are also random QuickTime events, but the controls are just so terrible to where even the QuickTime events are fucking bad. Not to mention, look at the cutscenes. I just gotta ask, why was this game even made? So bad, don't play it.
Today we're going to take a look at the Dell P-Series desktop display. It's a 27-inch monitor. It's powered by Type-C. You can even recharge your laptop.
Batman has some fantastic games, whether you're talking about his NES game, the underrated Adventures of Batman and Robin for SNES, or of course, the Arkham games. But then there is Batman Dark Tomorrow. This was actually kind of supposed to be Arkham before Arkham, but for whatever reason, it didn't turn out that way. And by for whatever reason, I actually mean for the reasons I'm about to list. Batman Dark Tomorrow contains linear stealth missions that just aren't fun to do due to the terrible controls. There's also a terrible camera and terrible hit detection. Not to mention, it looks and sounds bad, and the Joker in this game, my god, is he bad. Look, I don't want to play this game tomorrow, today, yesterday, or any other day, and neither should you.
Special Champis.
I really don't know how to segue into Charlie's Angels. Well, oh yeah, I really could say this. Charlie's Angels is the 26th worst game of all time. Charlie's Angels, the video game, is based off of the movie with the same name that came out at the same time and even includes the voices of the angels themselves. Cameron Diaz, Drew Barrymore, and Lucy Liu, respectively. And they all lend their voices for this game, and while they're really good actresses, they're terrible in this game. Not to mention, once you move forward in a level, you can't do something as simple as turn around and go back to maybe pick up an item you forgot to pick up or something. And some levels even loop, making the progression tedious and repetitive. That PlayStation Magazine didn't lie. They gave it a 1 out of 10. Ouch. The TurboGrafx 16 was a cool console but stood no chance against its competitors, the SNES and the Sega Genesis, for many reasons. But because of that, there weren't too many games on the TurboGrafx 16 that were too terrible. Well, I say that, but then you also take a look at Darkwing Duck. I really don't know how they fucked this one up so bad. We already got a Darkwing Duck game on the NES, which was awesome, and it was like Mega Man. So it's not a bad idea, it's something you can do. And the show is like colorful and everything, but the game we got came with delayed controls, like really delayed, terrible hit detection where you can sometimes jump on enemies and sometimes can't, repetitive music that make you want to rip your ears off, and now you got a fuck up of a video game.
I've got to work quickly, so I'm giving myself just 24 hours.
The Guy game. How was this allowed? Well, it technically wasn't, but we'll get to that. The Guy game isn't really a game, it's a quiz game at first, but then you get actual video footage of women flashing you. Or if you get the questions wrong, they don't do that, and they call you a pervert. I just told you the whole game. I don't have much to say about this one as it's not much of a video game at all, though it manages to be one of the worst ones of all time. It is worth noting that at the very end of the game, they get a girl that was underage to flash the camera. A lawsuit occurred, and now the Guy game is banned and is illegal porn. So the Guy game is a game that actually exists, but also not really. Anymore. Well, good, that means you don't have to play it. Oh boy, I'm sure you've heard about this one. Aliens Colonial Marines is terrible. This game had a tremendous amount of hype surrounding it because it was an official sequel to the Aliens movie. Not to mention, Lance Henriksen and Michael Biehn were all reprising their roles as Bishop and Hicks, respectively. But Aliens Colonial Marines ended up being terrible due to numerous technical problems, including the AI, which, by the way, the AI was shit just because of a simple typo in the game's code. This is just a major stain on the reputation of Gearbox, and I'm not quite sure if they are able to wipe it off.
Try and kiss you? No, you're leaning in again! I didn't want to kiss! This is the most uncomfortable fist fight I've ever been in.
Similar to the TurboGrafx-16 I mentioned earlier, the Sega Saturn was very short-lived and therefore didn't have as many terrible games on it, but that didn't stop the Crow City of Angels from being put on there. First off, the controls are just terrible, and I don't mean they're terrible when it comes to combat. I mean they're terrible when it comes to fucking walking. However, if the walking controls are a problem, don't even get me started on the combat, as you control so poorly you almost feel like there shouldn't even be any combat sections in the game at all. Throw that in with the terrible camera controls and you have the Crow City of Angels. One of the worst games of all time.
I tear down the mall with the bitch. For real. You can't even talk to the bitch. Nah. She fucking with all
If your video game company is known for making some of the worst video games of all time, you might want to rethink your profession. Okay, that may be a little harsh and unfair to say since I know the story of this company, but if you watched AVGN and then you saw this video, you should have expected a game from LJN. Which do I choose though? The Uncanny X-Men? Bill and Ted? Well, I pick Back to the Future. I feel this game is broken. It's an auto runner, which it shouldn't be because of how terrible the controls are. You get some random shit thrown at you, and you also fall over random shit too. Not to mention the music is terrible and never stops, and it's not even Back to the Future music. Back to the Future on NES is terrible, and nobody should play it. And the fact that it didn't even make the top 20 is astonishing. But that's the thing. There's still 20 more games to go, so stay. Back on the Atari 2600, pretty much any company can put any game on any system, which led to a bunch of pornographic video games, which led to Custer's Revenge. Now, the best way I can describe Custer's Revenge for you is you play as General Custer, completely naked with just a hat, a scarf, and boots. And you're fucking raping a naked Indian woman on a cactus. The fact that that was something that just came out of my mouth is mind-blowing, and there isn't much else to the game other than that. Many people were offended by this game, and I don't blame them. Not only is it offensively, culturally offensive, but it's also offensively bad. Fuck this game, it shouldn't exist.
And our youngest daughter, Josie. If you lost count, that's
We go from one Atari game to another with Pac-Man. This one was one of the games that led to the infamous video game crash of 1983. Another is a game I'll get to later on. Atari produced more copies of Pac-Man than actual Atari systems at the time, so they had a great deal of confidence in this game. However, the game included a distracting flicker and ear-grating sound effects even for the Atari. The other Atari games had sound effects that were more bearable than this one. Not to mention, it doesn't really control well, and it just looks stupid too. For Pac-Man and for Atari. Play literally any other version of Pac-Man. Leave this one in the doghouse.
And we'll slap 5 there. Then afterwards we'll hit the bars.
That sounds good to me. I'm 18 and I'm ready to do some living. We are gonna raise more hell than Hellraiser.
Hey, even a game that came out in 2019 can make the list, but it's also a part of a yearly franchise. I'm of course talking about WWE 2K20. Oh my god, how did this get released in the state it was in? Many missing modes, audio cuts, broken AI, laughable story, glitches. Holy shit, the glitches. I don't want to go over all of them. I suggest these videos on screen if you really want to see all the glitches. But you look at those glitches and you see that this game was far from ready to be released. Throw that in with the Y2K glitch when it turned 2020 and it stopped you from playing the game, and I feel so bad for any early adopters of this game. So bad. Not to mention they've officially devalued this game to $20. I'd say that is far too much for it still.
NB17. All over again.
Oh, Sonic, I got a bit of a love-hate relationship with this franchise. I love some of the games, but I hate an almost equal amount. One game that is terrible, and I think we can all agree on that, is Sonic 06. What can I say about this game that hasn't already been said? Terrible controls, terrible glitches, terrible graphics, terrible animations, terrible cutscenes. That one cutscene especially where Sonic fucking dies and then gets kissed by a real human. It gets brought back to life. Also, Princess Elise. No, just the fact that a real human character is having a relationship with a cartoon hedgehog is just unsettling. And I can go on and on and on about how Sonic 06 is a broken, annoying, cringe-worthy, unholy piece of shit. But I'm sure you already know, so we'll cut this one short.
Introducing TurboGrafx 16, the next-generation video game system.
Good old Bubsy. How did he come back? Why does he have more games now? I can put any Bubsy game on here, really, but let's be real, it's Bubsy 3D that has to take the spot. First of all, the game not only looks unfinished, it also looks like it's barely been started. Also, Bubsy is probably at his most obnoxious in this one, which says a lot, because he's pretty obnoxious in his other games. Also, the camera controls are shit too, where every time you jump onto a platform, the camera pans down and can possibly mess you up. And also the self-referential humor is just annoying. The controls are stupid too. All that and more makes Bubsy 3D a terrible video game.
Number 15. Number 15.
I sort of tried to ignore mobile games for this list because they're not really games. Well, The Life of Black Tiger exists, and it was a mobile game, but it is eligible for this list because it was on the PS4 as well. Look at this, though. This is a PS4 game released in 2017! There is an incredibly lame story as well as incredibly boring gameplay and annoying sound effects. Not to mention, every time you turn in the game, like, you turn your character around, it just looks unfinished. The little animation like that just looks so unfinished. There are also some terrible controls and collision detection. Need more convincing on how half-assed this game is? They also ripped the cover art right off of Google Images. That's how lazy they were when they made this game. Boy, this game, just don't play it. Terrible. Cannot believe this was released in 2017.
So, you're supposed to be Tom's best friend that he won't shut up about. Well, I don't see the appeal. That is very gross.
We all love Kinect, right? Yeah, no, we don't. Want to know what's even worse than just a terribly controlling Kinect game? A game that takes both the Kinect controls and the controls from the actual controller at the same time. That's what makes Steel Battalion Heavy Armor so terrible. It was built as the first serious AAA Kinect title, but it fell flat because of the terrible motion controls, and the Kinect seems confused between the motion controls and the button controls. It's very unresponsive as the Kinect doesn't read you properly when you're sitting down, which is something you naturally want to do when using a controller. So the game's nearly unplayable, and it may be one of the most unplayable Kinect games ever. And that does say a lot, considering, you know, Kinect Sports and Sonic Riders and Fighter Within, all of which are very unplayable, but this one takes the cake, just because they also threw in button controls as well. See what happens when you try to innovate sometimes? When you less than half-ass a video game and expect it to have a cartoon series, comic books, and a toy line, and be like the next Batman, you're really setting yourself up for failure. Such is the case with Drake of the 99 Dragons. I mean, even look at this character design and you think he comes right out of like the Batman animated show, but don't even compare the two. This one is just not fun. The controls are terrible. The camera sucks dick. There is a lock-on mechanic that doesn't even work, like it doesn't lock on at all, and the story sucks skunk ass. Seriously, your protagonist dies more times than I can count, and I don't know how you're supposed to enjoy this game at all. Fuck this. Even the protagonist can't handle it. How could we? Terrible.
19 men attacked our country. The 12 of you will be the first ones to fight back.
How do you love your family and leave them to go to war?
Aquaman. Kind of an underrated guy, or at least used to be, because luckily he hasn't been the butt of jokes recently due to his movie whooping the asses of many other movies that year at the box office. But before that, Aquaman Battle for Atlantis didn't help his case that much. First off, the game takes place underwater, which is interesting and makes sense, but you also control like you're underwater, so the combat just feels weird. Also, so many things are unfinished. Aquaman's face, for fuck's sake, is unfinished as he's missing eyes. Not to mention, when you get towards the end of the game crashes. I guess the programmers didn't want you to see this thing to the end. You shouldn't. It's terrible. Don't. Wow. This is what, the second DC game on this list? Wonder if there'll be any more.
Number 11. Your father will die.
Now, I love fighting games, but there are some serious stinkers in that genre, whether you're talking about Rise of the Robots, Catfight, or Dangerous Streets, all I considered for this list. But come on, the winner of the worst fighting game of all time is obviously Shaq Fu. Shaq Fu? More like Shaq Poo. I just want to say this, out of every game here, Shaq Fu might have the worst controls. I hardly ever feel like I'm in control of any character, but it doesn't matter because you're very likely to win anyways. Not to mention the music also sucks to listen to, and you got a game that isn't fun. Really not fun. However, you can't say it's so bad it's good. Like, the fact that this exists makes this fucking gold, but it didn't even make the top 10. Well, that was this part of the list.
I wanted to give to you, the last part of your notes here, the significance spiritually of the number 10.
Sorry, Sonic, you get 2 games on this list. As bad as 06 was, and is, I don't know why I said was, Sonic Boom is just much worse. Similar to 06, this was supposed to be a fresh, new start for Sonic, but failed miserably. At least Sonic 06 had a good soundtrack. Rise of Lyric has nothing going for it, not even that. The redesigns suck too, especially Knuckles. Not to mention, there are unbelievable glitches that let you skip certain segments of the game. Also, not to be a frame rate snob or anything, but the frame rate drops significantly, and it's also at random, and it's really distracting too. The camera and the controls are stupid and annoying too, and don't even get me started on the dialogue. Another thing making Rise of Lyric worse than 06, Sonic hasn't really fully recovered from this one in the long term. Now this one I probably should have included in the original list, but holy shit, what the fuck is Elf Bowling? It's right now a Flash game, but it was a game on numerous systems that costed money, so it counts for this list. What is Elf Bowling, you may ask? Well, it's a bowling game where the pins are replaced with elves. Do you think there's anything else? Well, there's not. This may be one of the most boring games ever, as there's no thought or strategy of any kind when playing this game. This is obviously less broken than most of the other games on this list, which is why it's not higher. but this shouldn't have been anything more than a stupid Flash game. And the fact that it's a game that costs money and is put on systems like the DS is just embarrassing. This is what you come up with.
So I'm going to be giving this flavor 8.5 out of 10 scoops.
I'm sure when I started this list back in part 1, you probably wondered where E.T. on the Atari would land on the list, if anywhere at all. Well, it lands at this spot at number 8, and let me explain why. This isn't the worst game ever. However, it's definitely not good. The game feels unfinished, even for the Atari. However, the game was made in a very short amount of time. However, the game was apparently so bad that the video game industry crashed. The outcome of this game and the outcome of how bad it was and how bad it did as well is really what it's remembered for. This game crashed the video game industry though, because that was an industry that couldn't handle such a bomb at the time. I know I've sort of been defending the game, but it is on here because it's very unfun and unfinished for an Atari game, and it's placed higher than it probably should, or maybe you think it probably should, due to the outcome. However, it's definitely not the worst. There are 7 games that are much worse than this one.
36.
Very close, but that's not it. Let's go to Gary the Retard. What number between 2 and 4?
Okay, no more defending. Oh, definitely not, because now we have another game that I should have included on my original list. That game is Dark Castle. I tried not to include games that aren't officially licensed, such as Action 52 or Hong Kong 97, because if they're unlicensed, of course they're going to be bad. However, I'm kind of surprised to find out that Dark Castle was officially licensed by Sega and Philips and whatever other system it was on. The game looks like a joke, but the controls are an even bigger joke. Navigating through the levels is a chore. At least with the other games on this list, most of them, you can move from one spot to another, and bada boom, you moved. Dark Castle can't even give you that much, because you'll constantly trip or run away without even doing so yourself. And don't even get me started on the sounds. And what I mean by the sounds is literally any sound you can hear in the game. The enemies, sound of you throwing rocks, the music, my god, the music. You hear what's in the background? Yeah, that's the music that plays throughout this whole game, and it never ends. Just plays the same tune. And by the way, you have the option to turn off the music, but then you just get this long sound, so just mute your TV. Last but not least though, let's say you can get past the terrible everything. You can actually beat this game in 10 minutes. Moving on.
Okay, Mrs. Puff, what's my final score?
6. When the term "it's so bad it's good" gets thrown around in the conversation about video games, you cannot help but think about the Zelda games on CDI. Link the Faces of Evil and Zelda Wanda Gamelon. These games are pretty much the same thing, so they share a spot. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not sure how or even if they were able to make the cutscenes with a straight face, but let's not discount how bad the gameplay is, as, oh boy, this is high up there with the worst controls of any video game. It also doesn't help that one of the buttons is attack and one of the other buttons is literally just anything else you can do in the game, which makes that a problem in and of itself. And the enemies are bullshit too. All that and more make these two games nearly unbearable. At least the music slaps.
Oh, chills. Literal chills.
It was number 5. Number 5 is my brother.
Oh my god, I forgot about
Hey, remember the last part where I said Custers Revenge is probably the most offensive game? While not as offensive, Ride to Hell Retribution is pretty fucked up. For the story, you play as Jay Conway and sees that his brother got killed, by a gang and seeks retribution. Sounds good, but the game portrays bikers as cold-blooded killers, and literally every single woman in the game is a sex object, with sex scenes that aren't even sex scenes. Not to mention, the game is just unfinished. You can very easily drive through the ground, or possibly anything, for example. Not to mention, the facial animations and the voice acting are all terrible, and the AI are second to Aliens, Colonial, Marines. Sometimes you'll shoot them in the face, and they won't go away. But it doesn't matter, because they still won't attack you. If only we got those next 2 games, man. Yeah, there are gonna be 2 more games. Fuck that.
7, 5. Number 4.
Talk about broken video games. Here's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You play as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, as the title suggests, which sounds neat, but Dr. Jekyll's weapon doesn't even work. And even if it did, it barely goes far anyways, so it's practically useless either way. And that is a bit of a problem, as everyone in the town wants your ass dead. Once you die as Jekyll, you then play as Hyde, and his weapon doesn't even shoot straight, it just flies everywhere, and you die once you progress too much. Or once you progress to the point where you progressed as Jekyll. Now, as explained in that one episode of Angry Video Game Nerd, you're not supposed to get far as Hyde since he's the bad guy, which sounds cool on paper for about 2 seconds, and then you realize, why integrate that then? This game is just pure torture, and no one should ever play it. There are many games on this list that I kinda struggle to call games. Those include the Guy game, Custers Revenge, or Elf Bowling. But the game that should be called a game the least has to be Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. That's like the actual name of the game. Strap yourselves in. This is one game that you might say should also be so bad it's good. But to be completely honest, I can't say that about this game, as it doesn't get the job done. You think I'm showing random pictures of random people? No, this is from Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. It claims to be FMV, or full motion video, but it's more of a slideshow with annoying filters and sound effects. On the box, it even says, plays like a game, but feels like a movie. But that's not true. It plays like a DVD menu, but it feels like a slideshow. I considered other FMV games like Night Trap or even Super Seducer can fall under that, but when they say they are full motion video, at least I can say that they tell the truth. This, I'm not quite sure what this is. Not to mention, they left an outtake in the game. I can go on and on about how bad this is, but we'll be here forever if I do that.
What kind of pencil do we take again?
Number 2. Take a number 2.
Looks like you took a big number 2.
I know for a fact you expected Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, or its fan name, Off the Road Racing, to be on this list. Why is it so high, you may ask? Well, you really explore the game rather than play it, as it's probably the most unfinished game ever released. What's so unfinished about it, you may ask? Well, you can go through anything and everything. Assets are visually incomplete, you accelerate when going up a hill, your opponent vehicle doesn't move, or at least in an update it moves but stops before the finish line, so you can't lose. Going backwards for long enough makes you go fast, like really fast, so fast you actually leave the boundaries of the game, and you're a winner. How do you make a typo that fucking bad? Does that answer your question? How did this game end up being a game that got an actual physical release? I mean, the ESRB saw this and gave it a rating. How are they able to play it and think it's okay? Jeez. And the fact that this isn't number 1.
I'm Luigi, number 1.
Okay. Throughout these few days and these 3 videos, we looked at some truly horrible video games. Games that nobody should ever play. Some should be explored like big rigs, but nobody should ever actually pay a penny and actually play any of these games. Many of you probably expected big rigs to be number 1, as it was number 1 on my old list, but the truth be told, at least you will have fun playing big rigs due to how fucking terrible it is. The same cannot be said about Superman 64. What is Superman 64, you may ask? A game where you fly through rings, and then you do a challenge, and then you fly through some more rings, then another challenge, so on and so forth. Not to mention the controls are unbearable, and the controls, they may not be as uncontrollable as Shaq Fu, but the amount of time you're given to do certain things, the controls make you want to rip your brain out. And if you miss even one ring, you have to do it all over again. And you shouldn't even want to do it once. There are games that are unfinished, offensive, control terribly, have awful AI, no thought while playing, sound annoying, or an example of the designers just being lazy. But Superman 64 is all of the above, and that's why Superman 64 is the worst game of all time. Well, that was all 3 lists of the top 30 worst games of all time. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed, hopefully you agree with me. Let me know your top 30 worst games of all time, or 20, or 10, or 5, or 2, or whatever. Whatever number you can think of. Let me know. And be sure to like this video, come subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.